Meantime, more political and legal fallout after an anti-ICE mob stormed a church in St. Paul. The Justice Department issuing a new warning to those agitators as Democrats in Minnesota ramp up calls to abolish ICE.
So now the Department of Justice now probing charges for anti-ICE agitators and questioning whether they violated church attendees' civil rights. Minnesota's Attorney General rejecting that claim, but the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, insists that they broke the law.
It's a crime, and so they will face a jury. If they're convicted, they will go to prison. People going to worship, and they are stormed by anti-law enforcement, anti-Christian rioters, and the response that you get from city leaders. Today, the governor just throws his hands up and says, "Oh, I've always said you should peacefully protest." That is just completely made up.
President Trump writing in a late-night Truth Social post, "These people are professionals. No person acts the way they act. They are highly trained to scream, rant, and rave like lunatics in a certain manner, just like they are doing. They are troublemakers who should be thrown in jail or thrown out of the country." And Fox News legal editor Kerri Urbahn joins us now. Kerri, what do you think could happen to the people that were there? As Paul Morrow pointed out earlier, they weren't masked. Many of these protesters have been masked, and they weren't, so they're easily recognizable on the videos.
Yeah, I think they're in big trouble. I really do. You know, watching the video, I really feel like they crossed a line that just can't be crossed and shouldn't be crossed. Took it to the next level. You go into a house of worship, you're interfering with that worship, you're intimidating the people who are worshiping. If you watch the video and you have that sound on and you hear that guy screaming, "Where are you?" with respect to the pastor, I think any parishioner sitting there would have been terrified. You don't know what these people are capable of, right? If they're willing to do this, you don't know what else they're willing to do. And so from a legal perspective, there are many ways to go at this from the Civil Rights Department's perspective. There are laws on the books that expressly prohibit this kind of behavior within churches. There are also laws that prohibit conspiracy to interfere in someone's constitutional right. Those laws are generally pretty broad, and there are a number of them. There are also other laws that prohibit interfering in the exercise of religion. And so the Civil Rights has a division at the Department of Justice has a lot to choose from, and I think they're going to go at this pretty hard.
Civil rights to the side. How about simple trespassing? I mean, they weren't invited in. They're not part of the congregation.
And that's how the state's going to approach this. I think that they've already announced, the police department, that they're going to look at this from a disorderly conduct perspective. I would imagine there could be some trespassing charges they throw in there. But I think where the meat is going to be is the Civil Rights Division at DOJ. This is a perfect situation for them, honestly, to really show the country what will happen if you interfere in people's fundamental rights to worship and exercise their faith. And I think they're going to do just that.
Let's listen to the caught on audio involving the fraud in Minnesota. The Attorney General, Keith Ellison, was on with Don Lemon last night talking about the church and the agitators.
The FACE Act, by the way, is designed to protect the rights of people seeking their reproductive rights so that people, for a religious reason, cannot just use religion to break into women's reproductive health centers. Right? So how they are stretching either of these laws to apply to people who protested in a church over the behavior or the perceived behavior of a religious leader is beyond me.
So he's a former congressman, he's a lawyer, he's the Attorney General of Minnesota, and he doesn't understand what the FACE Act is. Here, let me read to you. This is from the act itself, that by force or threat of force or by physical obstruction intentionally injures, intimidates, or interferes with or attempts to injure, intimidate, or interfere with any person lawfully exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of religious worship. Kerri.
Yeah, look, if you can read, you can fact check him and know that it's not true. And I was really disturbed by the fact that he would, what I feel like is lie about the law. He's the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. He is supposed to be neutrally applying and implementing the law. Instead, he went on Don Lemon, who, in my opinion, also acted disgracefully, and goes on his show and then lies about the law. There are people who are listening to that who are going to take his word for it because he's the AG. But yet, as you just put up on the screen, and if anyone wants to Google it, they can look for themselves, it's just not true. It protects access to abortion clinics and churches. Does that sound like a strange marriage of sorts? Yes, it is. And that's because when the law was passed in the 90s, that was the compromise with Republicans. Democrats wanted protection for abortion clinics, and Republicans said, okay, fine, but we're going to throw in churches too. So that's how this came to be. And it certainly protects against the kind of behavior that we saw happen on Sunday. But look, you don't even need the FACE Act. There are other federal statutes as well that really, in my opinion, very much apply to what we saw unfold there.
So the Trump administration is trying to prevent Minnesota from preventing more ICE agents to go to that state. Here's the DOJ court filing in Minnesota. I call for one, guys. Nothing in the Constitution remotely countenances this absurdity, which would render the supremacy of federal law an afterthought to local preference. So that's what the court filing says. Can they win on that argument?
Yeah, I do think they can win an argument. They have the Constitution and the law on their side, the supremacy clause, right? Federal law enforcement officers can enforce federal law. That's literally their job. If the state doesn't want to cooperate, that's their choice, but they certainly can't impede federal law enforcement officers from enforcing the law. And that's what we're seeing potentially play out here. So the states can raise the 10th Amendment all they want, but at the end of the day, ICE has a right to be there. They may not like the way ICE has been acting, but that's a separate question. That's not about whether they can actually be there enforcing the law, and they can.
So Minnesota now, there are at least 12 other states that don't plan on cooperating. There are at least 18 cities that don't plan on cooperating. There are at least 4 counties that don't plan on cooperating. That's a tough road ahead, Kerri.
It's a tough road ahead.
You're going to need a lot of ICE agents. And you might need the 1,500 out of Alaska that they're threatening to send into Minnesota.
It also puts the police departments in a terrible position. Like, I really feel badly for these folks. They are in this, they're looking at what's happening. They want to protect people. They understand that this is complicated and that there's a very strong political approach here from the White House as far as cracking down on immigration. I think there are a lot of people who agree that that's why Trump won initially. I think a lot of people think is his approach on immigration. I think there are some people who are concerned about how far it's going at this point. But in the middle of all this are police officers whose job is just to enforce the law.
Right.
And they're constantly, I think, having to choose between what their boss is saying at the podium at press conferences and what the president is saying, and meanwhile just wanting to protect people. So I feel badly for those people who are caught in the middle.
We are glad that you are able to join us, Kerri Urbahn. It's a big day. We might have even more legal news before the hour is out, so we might see you again.
We've got you on retainer.
That's right.
Thank you, Kerri.
Hey, it's Will Kane. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Kane podcast for full episodes right now.